What do you guys think?
Yeah,
Sounds
I think
good.
it's good.
Anna, since
A little bit quieter.
I'll give you a tiny boost,
Crank
but
me up.
from
Crank
this
me up,
side,
baby.
you all sound pretty level to me.
Oh, fantastic. Good. So, do we want to hit record on the?
I already started recording.
Oh, already started recording. Great. Well,
Oh,
we'll
man.
let some of the meeting stuff then.
Glad we
Fantastic.
didn't have any hot mic moments just then.
Exactly. So, hey, this is Incorruptible Massachusetts, where we talk about why our state house is so broken, what we can have here in Massachusetts if we fixed it, and how you can get involved. Welcome to our live broadcast.
It's really weird to see you all in 3D.
It is super strange, but it's beautiful, man. It's
Yeah.
weather
Yeah,
is
it's good weather for this.
incredible, just the best. So yeah, today I think why don't we just start at the beginning?
Yeah. Let's start from scratch. Well, so my name's Jordan Berg Powers. I use he, him, and I have 11 years experience in progressive politics in Massachusetts.
Jonathan Cohn, have been doing stuff on electoral and legislative campaigns here since 2013. We're almost exactly at the 8-year anniversary of my moving here.
Amazing. Anna
Yeah.
Callahan, she, her, live in Medford, and super excited to fix our state politics.
Yeah. Our politics in Massachusetts are broken and weird. And super
Broken and weird. Broken and weird. You know, the thing that got me super excited about state politics is this idea that we can really have all these things we fight for at the national level, we can have those for 7 million people.
Yeah.
I talked to somebody the other day and I said, we want a slate of candidates that is going to support Medicare for all. And
Yeah.
he said, well, that's at the national level. They're not going to be voting on that at the state level. And I said, they have a bill that's been there for 30 years. They are, of course, going to vote on that at the state level.
Yeah, and there's so many of things like Medicare for all, like we could fix and model what it could look like for the rest of the state. And other states, other conservatives, they model their terrible ideas in the states that they control. And yet here in Massachusetts, we're fighting to do basic things that we are supposed to be doing, right? It shouldn't be such a struggle for us to lead on climate. We are literally on the water.
Yep.
You figure a state on the water would want to lead on climate, especially when it's progressive as us, but it is like pulling hairs.
And I think that the general point reminds me of something we discussed in a prior episode, where on the national level, there's going to be always an intense debate to get to a majority, right? Where all the work to get Democrats to have the simple majorities that they do in the House and Senate, and how difficult it can be to make sure that you line up the votes to be just over 50%. But where we have over 90% Democratic Senate and over 80% Democratic House, and both of those give you more than the 2/3 majority, supermajority to override a veto with votes to spare, we shouldn't be thinking in the same way of how can we temper our ambitions to pass something. We should be thinking of what can we do to meet the moment.
Yeah, there's something really funny about having our legislature spend so much time thinking about Charlie Baker, who is superfluous currently to our state government. There is literally nothing he can stop if the Democrats in the legislature want to do it. They could lose votes and still easily do whatever it is that they wanted to do, and yet they hide behind him all the time.
Yeah, and then the other thing that I think about is how little people know about state politics. That people are just totally unaware that we could be passing all of these things for 7 million people. All the things we fight for at the national level. We fought against family separation, to keep families together. There was this huge battle, and yet we do that here in Massachusetts. We aren't passing the bills here in Massachusetts that would make that a reality, that would allow us to live our values here in Massachusetts.
Yeah, and there's even the things, if you take what's out there right now on voting reform and the desire for voting rights across the country, this is a reminder that while we focus on the way the two acts, the John Lewis Act and the For the People Act would improve voting in Georgia and Texas, it would improve voting in Massachusetts. We are behind. Our voting is as hard, I would argue, as it is in much of the places that Massachusetts voters look down on.
What's especially funny with that I often think about when seeing talk about what's happening in certain kind of red or even say purple Republican-controlled but purple states is you'll see things where like the Republicans gain full control and they start rolling back voting reforms to still being better than what Massachusetts has. It's like I remember thinking about that when in Wisconsin and they were cracking down on, which had election day registration, and they were making it harder. But it's like, we still don't have that though.
Yeah,
so it's like
yeah.
they're making it harder, which is bad and they shouldn't do. It's still better than what we have.
They're taking away 24-hour voting in Texas. They have 24-hour voting in Texas. They have drive-up voting. You can barely, it's like a pain to even find parking to go vote a lot of the times in cities, and they have drive-through parking, and they're taking it away on Sundays. I was like, I wish we had these things.
Well, this all plays into this idea that are the only things that matter, the only elections that matter are in swing states, because the only thing that matters is national elections, and only swing states can control national elections, and therefore we shouldn't focus on Massachusetts. Now, I think that that's completely wrong. We have talked to the folks who are pushing for Medicare for all, both at the national level as well as here at the state level, and I thought if any state in the country passed a Medicare for all style bill, that it would be dominoes everywhere, and they said, no, that's not true. There are only 3 states that they think it is a guarantee that if those states pass a single payer Medicare for all style in their own state, it will be dominoes, and that will be the end of our for-profit healthcare system. And those 3 states are California, New York, and Massachusetts. If we passed it here, that would be a national strategy for getting that bill passed. And yet people think that we shouldn't focus on Massachusetts.
Yeah, and just for people who wonder if local politics is important, I have this article up on my on my internet that's QAnon is focusing on school committee races. That's how they understand, as bonkers as they are. They believe things like the earth is flat and that lizards are controlling us, but they understand that school committee races are important. There was a program to encourage conservative women to run for school committee, and that's how we have Sarah Palin running from Wasilla, Alaska. Imagine if we thought as granular in Massachusetts, right, about ensuring that we have infrastructure to succeed and to push and to grow our movements from the ground up. There has never been a movement that had something happen on the national scale and was bestowed upon the rest of us. Movements have always grown from the ground up. They've always grown from state level, local politics, all the way up. And we need to remember our own history.
And by the way, if anybody has questions, please raise a hand. We would love to answer your questions.
The one thing as well in terms of the role of states that reminds me of is that what states you can also have kind of to shape what the terms of the debate are nationally as well. I remember back, it feels like, I think almost 10 years ago, really, at this point, when there was debate about raising the minimum wage to, I think the National Democrats push then was like $12 an hour, or $11 an hour, maybe it was even just like $10. I forget what it was at the time. And then you started seeing I remember seeing certain democratically controlled states pass exactly what Senate Democrats were pushing. It's like, well, thank you for making the Senate Democrats are pushing look like the far bound of what they will ever actually consider doing.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, if you, Maryland, pass what they're pushing, but with, like, carve-outs for drive-in theaters and a whole bunch of other things with your Democratic supermajority, suddenly that actually looks like their bill looks stronger than what you passed, rather than saying, okay, if Democrats nationally are pushing this number, we're doing a few dollars above that. So because it's like more unaffordable here, but we're going to go further so that their position looks like a more moderate compromise that they're making and changing how things are being debated.
So I want us to talk a little bit. So we've made a little bit of a case for why state politics matters here in Massachusetts, but I think we need to still understand why are we not able to pass anything here? Right? What is wrong with our state? And it's not the governor, because we have a veto-proof supermajorities in both houses. It's really not the state Senate at this moment. The bottleneck is the state house.
For the most part, yeah. So I think that the story I always tell people about Massachusetts is I was talking to a fairly conservative state rep, and the person said to me as a laugh, I imagine that there's more freedom in Chinese Communist Party than there is in the State House. So our Massachusetts State House is so undemocratic, it is so authoritarian that people will just, they can't even imagine. There's a culture of one person rule that they can't even imagine what it would be like to try to pass things and to step outside and to demand things and to push. It's just you get so acculturated to the idea that the only way to move things is to be nice to the people in power and to ask them nicely to do it.
And so one thing that this always reminds me of, so back in 2014, when I was volunteering for Don Berwick's gubernatorial campaign, one quote that he would often invoke, and I don't actually remember the guy who originated the quote, it wasn't Don Berwick, so was that every system is perfectly designed for the results that it produces.
Yeah.
And it's always a useful framework to think about things, that if you constantly see failed outcomes or outcomes that you don't want, is to think, what is the incentive structure in this system that is leading to these outcomes again and again? And that's something that's very true with the way that the House works, because if you have a centralized system where in the House, considering if the person who's the Speaker of the House controls committee assignments, and that means controls your pay directly, and controls your office, and controls your parking space, and controls how much staff you have, and can control whether or not your bills move, that creates a built-in incentive to want to go along, because there's a big kind of almost, let's say, loss aversion, because if you go against, you would presume that you'll lose a lot of the stuff that you have or won't be able to gain it. But it leads to a scenario in which people follow a logic that is an understandable incremental logic that never gets far.
Yes, that's well said. Yeah. So for people who don't know, our State House, you get a base pay, and there was a ballot initiative that put the state reps' pay based on the median incomes in Massachusetts. So the median income, I think, is like $66,000. So if you're the rep for here, right, and you make 65, that's not enough to live on if you live in a lot of parts of the state that are more expensive. And so your pay can increase if you're the head or vice chair, so second or first of a committee. And there are so to be speaker, right, there's 160 state reps. You need 81 votes to be speaker. There are 81 leadership positions with extra money.
And a lot of extra money, right? These leaders
up to double in some cases.
Right.
So you could lose half your income if you go against the speaker, and the speaker always has a majority of votes to ensure that it's always been gets to stay speaker.
And not just stay speaker, but it's very clear as you watch what happens in the State House. There have been state reps who, after they've stepped down, have said, yes, I was the chair of this committee, and as the chair of this committee, the speaker told me that if I didn't vote this way on this bill or that way on that bill, that I would not be the chair anymore.
Yeah.
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 I thought that worked for us.
Yeah, they don't work for us. They work for the speaker.
And it's a striking thing as well, as when you realize you have people in the building who actually, let's say, might with better incentives want to actually push good things forward. I think that's a not insignificant base. But there are a lot of them who just genuinely don't care.
Yes.
About policy. It's the type of person that I do describe as somebody who's just there really to cut ribbons.
Yep.
And so it helps reinforce that dynamic as well, as if you don't feel bad if you end up having to vote against something that you've co-sponsored because you didn't even care that you co-sponsored it in the first place. It helps to also exacerbate that underlying dynamic.
Yeah, I'm gonna use an example, a specific example. I'm gonna name check somebody. So Representative Kafka stepped down, and in his step down, he named 2 bills. He'd been there for 30 years. He named 2 bills, one of which was a side bill on on a small issue, and I was like, you've been there for 30 years, and the thing you're most proud of affects 10 people. What is this? And that's an example of somebody who clearly just wanted a paycheck.
But also an example of the general reality that our state house does not pass important legislation.
Yes, yeah. I think, if you listen to them talk, they'll talk a lot about the things that they've done, and it's not nothing, but it's always at the margins of the big things. And so the response I always give to any legislator who meets with me and is frustrated that I basically say they don't do anything, and I say, well, you've done a lot, except if you want to get around the state, want a new school building, want to have healthcare that's affordable, and don't want to die in a fiery death from climate change, and you want to be able to live here, like physically, like own a home, except for those issues, you're doing fantastic.
Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how is the flag?
Yeah, exactly. These are issues, and to be clear, they could fix those problems tomorrow. There are legislation to address all of these issues. They could do it tomorrow. They have a supermajority.
And I also want to bring up this point of leadership. So there's a group of people that is called leadership, right?
Yes.
There's the speaker, and then there are like the top 8 or 10 people or so that are in what's called the leadership team, and they do not appear to have any kind of vision. They don't appear to be leading on anything, right? They don't lead. They don't have a vision for like what the lives of the people of Massachusetts should be like. They don't have a vision for what policies should get passed. They don't seem to have a vision for even how you can have bills come up in the chamber so that you don't push everything off until literally the night before the session is over and then vote on everything. I'm trying to think of a single thing that they lead on, and essentially all they do is obstruct. They obstruct and obstruct and obstruct, and they prevent bills that we need from passing.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic to think at the federal level, because I have my definite large share of criticisms for both Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, and about but you get a sense that there is legislation that they would like to see passed, and you get a sense of that at the start of the session there is something that by the end of the session, if it passes, they will think, well, that was a successful time, and if it doesn't, that didn't work. You don't get that sense here that there's actually an agenda at the beginning of the session where it's these are the critical issues that we want to tackle.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to there are a lot of complaints, but there's 435 state Congress people. Nancy Pelosi has a slim majority. If our state house passed comprehensive reforms on our voting systems, attacked climate, raised wages, right? These are things that the Nancy Pelosi has done, right? We would be so much happier. It's weird that the congressional Democrats can move more progressively and effectively than Massachusetts with a super majority.
Yeah.
And this speaks to the fact that a ton of our state reps are really, they're Democrats in name, right?
In theory.
Because, they understand that their district has more Democrats than Republicans in it, and so that's the only way they can win. But in terms of the policies that they're willing to pass, and certainly willing to push for,
who knows? Most of the time it's who knows what they believe. They don't run on anything. They react. If you're looking at your state rep and you see the things that they'll promise you, if you look to election time and see what they say, they'll say, we got you money for a park. We got you, look, we passed this thing but secretly we were fighting it the whole time.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, that's the things they run on. They run on the accomplishments of activists, pushing them to do things, and a few dollars of pocket change that gets thrown at them so that everybody will be quiet.
And it speaks as well to the fact that one thing that where Massachusetts definitely stands out is the lack of competition in our elections. This was a few years ago, and maybe it's changed slightly, where Ballotpedia had us as one of the having some of the least competitive elections in the state. It's one thing that's actually quite funny to me whenever Democrats here talk about, we can't possibly do that because we might lose our seats to Republicans, and it's none of you even face Republican challengers, and they couldn't win in your district.
Yeah.
It's yes, there are too many people in your district who love Charlie Baker, but it's Trump got 30% of the vote in your very purple district by your words.
Yeah. They have a poor understanding of what it means to be worried or to take leadership. I guess I'd also say, I'm a big believer that if you if we did things for people, they would vote for you.
Madness.
Yeah.
But they don't want, they're, you know, we don't have same-day registration, we don't make voting very easy, and, you know, it's easier to just not let people vote, have the lowest rate of challenging incumbents of any state house in the country, and then they don't have to do anything. They don't have to pass any bills, they don't have to even, you know, claim that they're passing bills, because no one is running against them.
Yeah, and I think there's an important piece to this that we haven't actually discussed on the podcast, but I think is an important part of the system, is that your media system is also failing in this part of it. So the part that you're missing is that you know, NPR, our local NPR stations has reporters, but they're not reporters. They're not journalists. They're not looking into the State House. They're not trying to find out what happens. They are readers of my and other people's press releases. That's all they do. They read press releases. The State House News is a press release machine. All they do is synthesize people's press releases. They're not digging in. They're not asking tough questions. They're not doing analysis of legislation. One of my biggest pet peeves is you'll see in the State House, they'll say, you know, Charlie Baker says that 45% of something happens. I was like, that's a knowable thing. You could Google that, not just quote the dumb thing he said. Maybe you should look it up and see if it's true, right? Like, they don't do any of those things. So our news media system is a press release repeater. That is it. That is all they do. And so most people don't know what's happening.
And let's also remind people that it is almost impossible to know what is happening at the State House, right?
Yeah.
Everything happens in closed-door meetings. Things happen in committees where you can't know their votes. By default, even the votes on the floor are secret from you.
Yes.
And things get changed drastically in these unknown settings. And then suddenly a bill will come up for a vote, and there's literally 48 hours, if you're lucky, 24 hours, sometimes even less, to read a 1,000-page bill and mobilize people around it and come up with amendments. It's impossible to be engaged with our State House.
Yes, I would love to read that story.
What it reminds me of in terms of the quality of State House reporting, and there are some journalists who do decent work, but what I remember is back when I was organizing against the Olympic bid back in 2015, and it's weird we're approaching the 6-year anniversary of the bid's death. That there was a Globe article about how I think it was the House had passed a bill to study, to create a commission to study the Olympics, whatever number to one, and the article did not say who the one was. I was like, that's the easiest thing to put into this. You were telling me that there was literally one person who voted against this, and you don't think it's relevant who that one person is?
But they might not know. That's the worst thing about it. It might not be knowable to the journalist. Yeah, I mean, I want to be fair. I think it's really difficult, and I think there's an ecosystem of failure. I think when I think about why our State House is the way it is, it's an ecosystem of failure across the board. Our legislators don't have vision. They're not pushing. They're not asking tough things. They're not asking for things. We're not, the part of Incorruptibles is that there needs to be more pushing from the outside. We need to be mobilized as a democratic as a small d Democrats to care about our democracy and our local and be better stewards of our democracy, and our media needs to be allies with that and pushing the State House to do all the things you've listed are all things that should appear regularly in articles. This bill died. We don't know why. Yep. The advocates were pushing. It got filed to nowhere to study, right? This is what to study means, right? Just some basic information. We need all of these things together if we're gonna turn this around.
So I do want to mention that we are in just a minute or two. We are going to go ahead with our giant puppet and some other folks who are going to join us here. We're going to do a little political theater on the State House steps. It's going to be super fun, so please join us for that. Right now, we are going to read a few limericks about the State House that came in over Twitter.
I feel like I should not be the one to read them though, because I'm terrible.
We had 3, so we'll each do one.
Okay, that sounds
and
good.
I'll read one and you read one.
Jonathan, do you want to do your own, or
I'm
should
happy to do my own.
Okay, I'll do hold Hogan accountable because I'm also speaks to my heart. As somebody who'd like to
And last
get,
chance for
you know,
questions, let us know.
get better representation there. There once was a state house so bloated, when the interests of the rich are promoted. The people got sick, then 22 came quick, and the state house, and out of the state house they were voted.
Nice. Good one. All right, so here's one. My bill just went into committee. We all know it's going to be shitty. We can't see their votes or even the notes. It will never get passed. What a pity.
Hit the thing, otherwise I'm gonna lose it.
Okay.
You're up.
Where's? Oh yeah, here's my own. When a bill's sent to study, things start getting muddy. It's not voted down, so its sponsor won't frown. It's dead, but there's nothing quite bloody.
Yeah. Do people have any quick questions about the state house or your failed representation there?
Yeah.
I have a question as someone who's exploring to run for the state house.
Woo-hoo!
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Someone exploring around for the state house. Yes.
Yes.
I'm going to run for what's in the tax district.
Okay.
I'm not
Yeah.
I beg your pardon. Because she is advocating transparency. So, as a person who's trying to get into the politics, what are some of the things you want to see in a representative? Because I want to have
That's a great question.
Let's
so
repeat
for
the question.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll repeat it. So, so the question was, as somebody who's thinking about running for the state house, what is something that we would like to see in somebody who is a state rep in our state house? I mean, I have lots of thoughts.
Sure.
One is-
I'll start with the transparency and the power of the speaker.
Yeah.
So, we will never get out of this terrible quagmire that we are in if we don't have people who are willing, who understand that giving their power to the speaker means they don't have power. When you give up your own power,
Yeah.
right? When you vote against transparency, right? When you vote that the committee votes should be secret, when you vote that votes should be secret, when you vote that we shouldn't have any time to read bills, when you vote for those things, or when you vote that the speaker should be able to pay more money to the chairs and co-chairs, when you vote that the speaker should not have term limits, when you vote to increase the power of the speaker, or when you vote to make our state house less transparent, that you are giving up your power and you are giving up our power. And that we will never get out of this problem if we can't have people who are willing to draw that line. So that, to me, from a policy perspective, is very important.
I'd say for me, just having votes, I would like them to vote on things. So most people don't know this, but they don't vote on anything. Nothing ever comes to an actual vote. They regularly just agree to not do anything. They sort of just, everyone says, yeah, we're not gonna do anything. They all say yes. And so we would like them to take votes on things, which seems funny to say, but that's it. So, we have a few people who, what they'll say, stand for a vote, which means they'll demand votes on important issues. And that's the biggest ask for me to any rep is, will you stand for votes? Will you require them for people so that regular people can know how their elected officials believe on issues?
And if I may, sorry to jump in.
Go ahead.
I was just going to jump in on that because of the whole amendment podcast. We did a
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
episode on amendments, and
Yes.
if you can take any bill, we complain a lot about how bills are in committee and then we can't see how people vote. Any legislator, you don't need 16 people to do roll call. Any legislator, is that correct, can take something and make it an amendment, and if you then put that amendment up for a vote, it at least has to get voted on. We may not see how those votes.
it could still be
You still need the 16. You still need the 16. But you can put up something for an amendment and then try and get 16 people and have that roll call vote. So what happens all the time is people put up amendments and then they withdraw the amendment.
Yeah,
Incredibly frustrating.
which means that nothing happened.
Yeah. The one thing I'll also add in terms of things looking in for legislators is to avoid the phenomenon that can sometimes get called legisplaining, which is
Oh,
where
yes.
legislators will respond to you when they've done something bad about how really you just don't understand how it is here.
Oh, yes.
And they'll use talking points often given to them by those above them to try to explain away. And it's like, if we disagree on something, just honestly explain to me why you did the bad thing for
Yeah.
the honest reasons why you did it. Because I have more respect if you just say, I did it because I didn't want to lose my committee
Yeah.
chair, than trying to create a bizarre labyrinthine argument to pretend it's a matter of principle.
Yes. Yeah. So one of the things that happens is I always tell legislators, like, don't lie to my face. I'm not
Yeah.
stupid. Like, I don't have, oh my God, I have so little patience for that. Like, just say you did the bad thing because you were scared. Like, it's
Yeah.
okay. Say you did the,
'Cause, like,
you know.
there's no room for growth if you don't acknowledge the incentive structure that you're in.
I will say, I just want to say a little plug for our podcast. It's called, The State House is Bonkers is my favorite episode that we did as a couple, and it's all about the amendment process in Massachusetts, and you should listen to it. It's fantastic, and also you will really get a sense of how bonkers this all is. I feel like we should, do you want to talk?
Well, I do want to say something else about this question, because I feel like we've talked a lot about like process and procedure,
Oh, yeah.
and we have not said anything about policy. And,
Right,
you know,
'cause-
I think we cannot let that question go without talking about policy. And so, can we have a short discussion of how much money, like not how
Oh,
much,
yeah.
but like where is money spent lobbying at the State House? My big one is the healthcare industry spends
Yeah.
a crap ton of money at the State House, and
Yeah.
that is why we cannot get single payer passed here. Right? Single payer would
Yeah.
benefit everybody except the billionaires.
Yeah.
So there is no reason we should not pass that. And there are a number of other areas where it's really money. It's really money that
Yeah.
is preventing us from passing bills.
I mean, I have a long list.
Great.
Go ahead, Jonathan. Maybe you
You
should
can
go first. I guess I'd say, one of my favorites is a few years ago they passed a bill that made it harder for solar, which they did in fact go back and fix. But the reason they did it is that it was written by National Grid and EverSource. The bill was like entirely written by them, and I was like, and I would joke with legislators like, congratulations, you bailed out their stockholders because they have invested in oil and gas pipelines.
My favorite quick thing just to talk about that bill, it was an amazing demonstration of State House process where all but 3 state reps present voted for this bill. I know that it was, I believe it was like Denise Provo and John Hacht voted no and Frank Smisek voted present. And then after
It
they
was a few years
voted,
ago,
after they voted for this bill, then a number of the reps who voted for it signed on to this letter saying the bill we voted for is actively harmful and would do damage to the state. We're asking the Senate to pass something better.
Yeah, that truly happened. And then,
And they wanted a gold star for doing that.
yeah, they're like, look, we signed this letter. And then, so because the bill came out in the morning, it was 351 pages, and they passed it at like 3 o'clock, and so no one had time to read it. Our state house and our state generally hates education. They will all run on education, but we shortchange our children. We don't care about our kids in any demonstrable way. And so that's another one where money, especially around privatization of our public schools, but we think of privatization just as a charter fight. And let me just say that our schools are becoming more and more private through the testing, which is a huge money pit that makes no sense. It's a money pit, and they all know the tests don't work, and they still put money into it. That's private parts. Right? There's all these parts to education that are private, and there's so much money out there. And the last one that's very personal to me is we should treat broadband as a utility, and the reason we don't is because Comcast has a stranglehold of our state house. And it's just ridiculous. Like, if you're in Western Mass, you have to use Verizon or Comcast or things. We have a public entity that's made to push broadband because the private sector won't do it to Western Mass, and they're requiring corporations to be the people filling it in and trying to stop municipal broadband from going to these areas that were not served by corporations, right? And so we need that piece is just bonkers.
I'm going to throw in a couple more. Your T-shirt, tax the rich.
Yes.
If we cannot fund these programs if we don't tax people. And you know what? I love the way, Jordan, you phrased it the other day. It was like, we know where all the money is.
Yes.
The money is all in the hands of rich people because, especially under COVID, it was just a complete sucking
Yeah,
up
they just
out of
sucked
our
our money away.
pockets and sucked right up into the bank accounts of the uber wealthy. So that is, if you want to pay for anything, that's where the money is. That's who you have to tax. And then I also think like workers' rights. You know,
Oh my God, yeah.
that's a huge one where there's a lot of money spent. And then the real estate lobby is also big.
Oh, yeah.
And so let's not forget housing policy. So all of these I think are important when you look at what are policies that benefit the 99% and what are policies that benefit the 1%.
Yeah, no, and I would just agree, especially with the need to kind of tax the rich more in the state, that it's not even just, let's say, like the organized interest, but their general kind of, the people that you hear from in your district are probably those who skew more affluent. The people that show up to your fundraisers will skew more affluent. So your whole idea of who would even be hit by a modest tax increase is very skewed, so that you'll have so many legislators being like, we can't possibly raise the capital gains tax. That's
Oh my God, yes.
That'll hit working class people who have lots of money in capital gains.
Yeah. There's that's my favorite one. You'll be like, it hits the top 20%. They're like, but that's everyone I talk to.
Right. Exactly. All right, I'm going to wrap us up because we're a little behind our original schedule, and
Okay.
we're going to follow this this horrible looking giant puppet who is representing our speaker leadership. We're going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to march on up to the State House. We got some signs. We have some political theater we're going to do, and so please join us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Awesome,
everybody.
thank you.
Nice seeing everyone in 3D.
Awesome. So if you haven't made a sign yet or gotten a sign, come on over. We got some cool signs here. Please join us. We'll do a super brief march just inside of this. We'll go down there. We'll come back up here. We're going to cross the street, go to the State House.